All right. So, Vis, are you following the FIFA, the World Cup?
Yes. England played yesterday. That was nice to watch.
Oh,
I felt obliged to decide England, given that I'm in England. But yeah, what about you?
I have to like maybe there are few countries that I would want to follow. I'll probably just keep up with that. Argentina, Italy, of course,
Yeah,
and and of course I want to. I think the Mbappe game that was actually pretty good.
yeah, yeah. Do you do you stay up to watch the games with the time zone
Yeah,
difference?
I think that's the saddest part about this because we have to kind of extend, be awake for the late night. So the European games are, like that's the only thing. But apart from that, game is game. Everyone is active. The
Yeah.
group chat is going bonkers. So
But there is some fun around staying up late and watching the games live, right? Rather than a replay the next day.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think we're just waiting for more people to join, I guess.
I will probably give it a few more minutes and then we'll probably get started. I know people are joining in.
Yeah,
Let's go. A few more minutes.
cool. Any
So
fun
right
plans?
now there's been, yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, any fun plans for the weekend?
I do. I have a little bit of travel and excited for that. My friend is getting married, so a
Very
lot of
nice.
good things happening next week.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like a
I think that's the cue. Uh, I know people are joining in, but probably probably going to take a few more minutes for everyone to get settled in. But until then, I think we can start with a little bit of introduction in terms of what we are doing here, why we have invited a lot of you folks to join with us today. That's fairly because two reasons. One is we have Viz, Viz is joining us from Concirrus. He is a London-based B2B marketer. And before this, he was a scientist. And right now at Concirrus, he's taking care of ABM and GTM systems that generate pipeline at Concirrus. So he pretty much deploys AI tools and agents that pretty much gives a 10x output to his revenue workflow, surfacing high intent accounts, targeting the right ICP accounts, and kind of figuring out what should be the next game plan, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to let Viz also showcase his fully built, completely autonomous system that he has built and the tech stack that he has used here. So those are the things that we're going to cover today. That being said, thanks everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us for this webinar. So if you're an existing client of Factors or you're in the market to kind of explore new tools like this, stay till the end because I'm going to show you pretty cool things at the later part of this webinar. We recently launched our MCP to the broader audience. So I'm going to show you a couple of agents that our clients are actually using to leverage MCP in addition to all the other tech stack that they have. So stay tuned for that. But Wes, over to you. A little bit about yourself for the larger audience. Tell us more about yourself and how does a scientist who specializes in stem cells end up in B2B marketing?
Yeah, thanks, Harish. And thank you everyone for joining. I wish it was as simple as saying I woke up being a B2B marketer, but the story is a bit interesting actually. So my background is in biosciences. I did stem cells in undergrad. I then spent quite a bit of time actually in our uni's enterprise ecosystem for quite a bit. That was where I sort of got first-hand experience of the commercial side of biotech. And then after finishing my undergraduate studies, I then went on to join a VC-backed biotech startup, interestingly in sales. And being the first salesperson, it was a bit challenging, as you can imagine. We had no no marketing team. So I made the move into marketing. Reason being, selling without marketing is like driving a car without fuel. It's just really hard to sell. And that's where I sort of got my first-hand experience within B2B marketing. I stayed in the same company for quite a few years. And then I moved into my current company, Concirrus, as the first ABM hire. I do bits and bobs about RevOps as well. There's a bit of crossover there, but interestingly, this has been my journey. And we've all heard of the word GTM as well. It's been so widely used. And I like to think of GTM as this intersection between sales and marketing. And this is exactly where I am right now at Concirrus within ABM. In my day-to-day, I'm doing a lot in marketing, but I also am interfacing quite a bit with sales. But yeah, that's been my journey today.
Thanks for that, Vis. And I know, even in our weekly calls, and I know pretty much that about you. You don't come from a traditional marketing background, like you've explained. There's a lot of science-backed education that you come from, but you did work in a couple of companies to kind of get an insight on how things work in general, right? In the pure B2B play of things.
Yeah.
So, given that you come from an experimental background, science background, for someone who runs campaigns, in day-to-day basis, what do you think should be that one mindset shift that they need to think about, when they're building some things like this?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. So I think one of the key mindsets that we should have in today's day and age is how we can use AI as a talent multiplier, pretty much. And what do I mean by this? When you go on LinkedIn every day, you see all these LinkedIn influencers posting about AI, Claude, workflows, agentic outbound systems. I'm under the firm belief that AI will not replace us as marketers, but it will 10x our output. We can achieve a lot more with less. And I guess the question is, when it comes to marketing as a whole, I think that seems to be a shift with marketing back both top and bottom line metrics. And what I'm saying is, yes, we're getting clicks, conversions, impressions. That's great. Those are sort of the high level indicators. But the question is, how does marketing activity at the top link to revenue outcomes, pipeline, for example, in a way that commercial leaders understand? And to that point as well, commercial leaders today are becoming a lot more ROI conscious. For every marketing dollar that we spend, how is that coming back as revenue? And traditionally, it's been very difficult to track that through AI. But I feel like now with Claude agents and co-work, tracking attribution and ROI is becoming a lot more streamlined. And I think it's something that marketers out there should be aware of and have access to. And personally, for me, in my role as an ABM marketer, a lot of what I do in my day-to-day is think about systems and processes. In other words, if there's something that I'm doing that's manual, for example, generating LinkedIn ads or attribute pipeline, what percentage of pipeline has come from X, Y, and Z sources? How do I automate all of that to make it streamlined for me to go back to leadership and say, marketing brought in X amount of pipeline this quarter, we've spent so and so amount. So for every dollar of marketing spend, I can confidently say we've generated 3x worth of pipeline, as an example. And I think a lot of that is where orchestration comes into play as well, with the different tools we use. How do we do outreach, for example, for inbound website visitors, to what kind of ads or content do we serve, up to the fact that how do we track pipeline and how are we measuring intent as deals are being progressed.
That's actually well put, and this is more of a curiosity thing. In your company, or even your colleagues, other B2B marketers in general, do you see a common trend in how they've also adopted AI for their day-to-day operations?
Pardon, sorry, you just cut there. Can you repeat the question?
Do you also see your colleagues, in the B2B marketing world, are they also leveraging agents as we are right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think right now there's just a lot of noise in the AI space. And I think a lot of my personal B2B marketing connections, They use AI, yes, OpenAI, Claude, Gemini, but it's mostly to do with the chat function, which I think we're all aware of. It's just one-off questions of, I'm running a campaign, I'm doing XYZ, help me plan a campaign. That's great, and I think it's a fantastic use case for one-off campaigns. But where I think the value lies is, running projects, Claude Cowork as an example. How do we retain that memory, and how do we improve a process that's been instilled already for us to not come back and restart the prompt from scratch, which I think that's where a lot of time is lost. And also in terms of AI agents, how are we connecting different tools and softwares that we use through MCP, so everything is just unified in one place. You don't have to sift through the different softwares, and that's where I think there's a little bit of disconnect. And I also think in terms of the actual agents themselves, it can be quite daunting. When you think of Claude Code, you think, oh, I need to know how to code, and it's too challenging for me to use. But once you give it a try, it's actually quite intuitive. And once you start, you just don't stop building. You just think about, what other workflows can I automate? What other cool insights can I generate to go back to leadership and say, this is what I think the pipeline is. This is where marketing's come in. But yeah, that's what I've seen, at least in my connections and the field.
I actually agree with you because I still know a good percentage of my connections. They are still sticking with how people were using ChatGPT a year back, right? The conversation, do this, do that.
Yeah.
And when they transition to something like Claude Code, it looks a bit interesting, but at the end of the day, it's still a chat interface. There's no coding here, but it looks so good. But it also gets a lot of things done, things that a normal UI application, LLM application would not be able to do, right? So I think a lot of people need to kind of broaden their entire, feedback and kind of play around more of these tools.
Exactly. And I think the beauty as well is, I'm not trying to sell Claude, but full transparency, I use Claude as my main LLM. The ability to have, MD files about me, for example, this is me, I think this way, I'm analytical, I like to think in terms of ROI, having that, install it within your desktop and having Claude load that sort of file before every prompt helps really sharpen your output. And this is just, for example, on my personal preferences. When I'm doing content, as an example, we all know that AI tends to spit out those long EM dashes, which to me, it's insane. How do we move away from AI-driven writing to something that's humanized, something that reads like a human, and being able to say, this is exactly how I want the output to be, and it being remembered across the different projects is a massive, time saver in that sense. But yeah, that's just one of many different benefits that I've personally seen from using Claude Cowork as, your LLM of choice.
It's actually nice, but okay, so for the viewers who are actually tuned in to kind of see the protein of this webinar, which is to say, hey, show us what you built. We want to see that, right? So let's double down, let's dive in. And I'm just going to start off by asking you a very simple question. So, Viz, you're currently running GTM, the entire GTM, you own the tech stack at Concirrus, right? But you are taking care of your account-based marketing as well. So maybe give us a sense of what was the thing you actually took ownership of?
Yeah.
And now with the GTM, how are things moving together?
Yeah, of course. I just want to preface by saying, when we think about ABM, it's a very focused form of marketing. You have, a set list of accounts you want to pursue. If you close deals with them and you expand, accelerate, that's basically it. You're done, right? You've won the game. But for ABM to work, there needs to be a component of both demand gen and thought leadership. So when I say I run ABM, it's essentially a mixture of those three elements, but my personal focus is within ABM. And when we think about ABM and demand gen, there's two main outcomes. So outcome one is we want to generate inbound traffic from target accounts to our website. It could be a website visit, it could be a form fill, all those different interactions. That's basically outcome one. And I guess outcome tools where I see a lot of teams tend to struggle with is how fast are we able to react on the intent or any website visits that we're getting. It could be as simple as reaching out via email, or it could be giving a phone call. That's where I basically spend a lot of my time in those two elements. So I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me 1 second.
Awesome.
So perfect. Sorry. Let me know if you see my screen. It should say ABM orchestration.
Perfect.
Yep, cool. So this first slide basically points to what I mentioned about outcome one. This is to do with generating inbound website visits from our target accounts. And this is the tech stack that we have. It's actually quite lean and mean. And I've been quite deliberate with the tools that I've chosen. So we start off with HubSpot on the left. All of our target account intelligence data sets, all of that lives within HubSpot. And there's a very nice way of tagging target accounts in HubSpot. It should be a UI that's visible on the top right of your company page. So we tag all of our accounts in HubSpot, and HubSpot actually is integrated with a tool that we use called User-led. They're very slick one-to-one LinkedIn ads ABM platform. They do sales outreach as well, but this basically allows us to do one-to-one LinkedIn ads at scale. So we target around 60 to 70 accounts now. So LinkedIn ads comes out from user-led, that's as well as mentioned here. And then all of this is actually connected to Factors as well. So whenever someone from a target account engages with LinkedIn ads, they go on our website, all of this activity and intent is tracked within Factors. So it's a very nice sort of closed feedback loop, in a sense that when we see impressions and clicks, signals of intent coming in, all of it's tracked within Factors. And this gives us a very high level brief of what we're seeing for top line metrics.
That's awesome. I have a quick question on that. So
Yep.
the user led, so it basically helps you personalize both the campaign, ad creative, and the landing site as well.
Precisely, yes. So if you think about LinkedIn ad creatives, the usual option is to just run one campaign, 4 or 5 creatives targeting a bunch of
Yeah.
different accounts. That's great. And typical click-through rates you'll see is around, 0.2%, 0.3%. That is usually the industry benchmark. But with user-led, what we can do is we can actually generate individual campaigns and assets for different accounts. So for an example, if let's say I'm running LinkedIn ads targeting Factors, you'll see on your feed, Factors AI with your logo there, value props messaging. And because your company logo and, if let's say you were called out in the ad creative, click-through rates are higher because you feel like it's very personalized, it's very one-to-one,
Of
it's very
course.
bespoke. And I'm able to do it in a fraction of the time that you would doing, those one-to-one campaigns manually. And the beauty as well is we have the Factors SDK installed within the user landing page. So whenever someone clicks on the ad and goes to our website, it's all tracked within Factors.
Awesome. And that's precisely how the next slide is going to come together.
Yes, exactly. So this is, as mentioned, where we're monitoring inbound website activity. And this is where I feel like most teams tend to struggle with. It's how fast are we able to react to that initial intent? And this slide is quite busy, but I'll break it down into digestible chunks for you guys. But the point is, this is the sales motion. So how are we running signal to outreach as part of our tech stack? So when a target account visits our website, this is tracked on Factors. I will briefly walk you through what the backend, well, when I say backend, it's the light backend, what that would look like. Factors then fires a webhook into Clay, which is our enrichment tool of choice. Clay is amazing. It pulls emails, names, LinkedIn, mobile. I'm pretty sure everyone's aware, but Clay does a lot more than that as well. It orchestrates outreach for you. It integrates through webhooks with a bunch of different outreach tools. So Clay is the orchestration brain for this entire workflow. And then you have Claude, which you can access directly within Clay as well. It's an API. And we use Claude to generate one-to-one bespoke outreach templates for the different personas that hit our website. Again, I'll cover this in the next few slides. And then this basically goes to Smart Lead, which is our sales outbound software that we use to send personalized outreach emails, and then HeyReach as well, which is pretty much the cousin of Smart Lead. It's the same thing, but for LinkedIn, and you can automate entire campaigns. You can like a person's post, follow them, and then send them emails. Is a lot more organic, I suppose, than just sending emails directly.
This is amazing. This is basically a very lean tech stack. And of course, with Clay, you're able to kind of get most of the information in terms of enrichment, contacts, emails, and you're also using the API Factors API to kind of get the more journey data out of this. So it's a one-stop basically that covers the majority of your entire tech stack. And
Yep.
then both Smart Lead and HeyReach are just execution layers for you.
Exactly. And the beauty as well is this entire setup is fully agentic. There's no human involved, which in all honesty makes my life a lot easier in terms of how fast and how efficient we reach out to any intent that we're getting on our website. And the beauty as well is this is true ABM in the sense that every individual contact who hits our website gets a outreach messaging that's unique to them. And credits to your team as well, to Raksha, your GTM engineers. We've given Claude a list of value props and pain points to work from for the different personas we target. I'm not going to go into the specifics because I'll bore you guys to death, but depending on the person's job title, they will have specific pain points and value props. And then we've also given boundaries for the LLM to work so it doesn't hallucinate and end up sending outreach that's completely outside of our brand guidelines and messaging as well.
That's amazing, Wiz. And I
Yeah.
know most of the viewers are actually dying to ask this one question.
Yeah.
Show us the workflow. So let's get down to it. Would
Yeah.
love for you to kind of walk us through a step by step on how you're getting this data, how you configured it in Factors, where does it get pushed.
Yep.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, of course. So just to start with this portion here, so this is the Factors UI, and you're pretty much able to generate alert workflow. So in this case, we've set filters where if the HubSpot target account is true, it's obviously that's within our realm. And then a bunch of other filters as well. You can be quite specific and granular with them. And what happens is whenever an account populates this, a webhook fires. There you go. So the webhook is created and it integrates directly within Clay. And all of this is native within the Factors platform. And I am just going to show you guys what it looks like within Clay. Let me know if you see my Clay UI, Harish.
Perfect.
Yep,
Yeah.
cool. So this is exactly where the information is passed. So this is within Clay. What I mentioned before with Factors firing the webhook is essentially being received here. And automatically we'll pull information like the company domain. So who exactly was the visitor from, which domain were they from, company name, where they're based physically in the UK, in the US, user state as well. And then we can also see the Journey API. And what this means is it basically gives us a high-level brief of the user journey on our website. So for example, if they've been on our homepage for 5 seconds and then they've been on our resources page, it summarizes it all here. And we basically get a very high-level brief of how engaged a prospect is. And then based on a list of criteria of job titles we target, Clay automatically then triangulates and says it could be, any one of these 3 people, it could be any one of these 7 people. And that very quickly allows us to generate relevant contacts. All of this is then passed into the people enrichment table. So here we actually get the names, first, last names, titles of our ICP job titles. Everything is done using AI. And then the emails and the company names, they get pulled as well using Clay and validated so they don't bounce, because we all hate bounce emails. And then the beauty is here. So Claude generates emails and LinkedIn outreach specific to each person based on the value props and pain points that we got it with. So in this case, as we can see with Michael, it says, Michael moving fast, blah, blah, blah. value props, how we solve their problems, and then a call to action. We're trying to keep it very content focused. And you get the idea. It's the same thing for everyone. We send 4 emails, subject, LinkedIn message. And then as soon as all of this is drafted, they just get added on to a pre-existing smart lead campaign or a Hey Reach campaign. And as you can imagine, it just is evergreen. It runs 24/7. It just keeps adding prospects. And the moment we get a reply or response, the workflow pauses. This gets passed on to our sales team. A human reviews it, and then they can respond whether or not to book a meeting to call them. So there is a human in the loop element to it, but a lot of the upfront manual work is done fully by AI, which is a massive lifesaver for my case.
And this is amazing because the steps here, everything happens in a very near real time. Let's say
Yeah,
when a target account visits Concirrus, boom,
yeah,
Factors pushes an alert to Clay, and then automatically the entire enrichment and orchestration
yeah,
till the execution of it, right?
yeah,
So while all of this happens, how much of a factor is warming up email domains, Wiz? I know a lot
yeah,
of the, let's say, new GTM engineers, when they're trying to build an automation for, let's say, email,
yeah,
I think it's probably overlooked.
yeah.
But what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think, when we think about email outreach, you can draft the best email subject and email body in the world, but if your email ends up going into junk or spam, that's it. It's all just lost cause and lost effort. And I think before we even start considering, all of the AI outbound stuff, the email drafting, subject lining, I think warming up your mailboxes is one of the most fundamental things you can do. And what do I mean by this? So when you do outreach, um, you know, email domain providers, in today's era, they're a lot more conscious of bot activity and mass outreach emails. And you often hear email domains being blocked. That's exactly why when you don't warm up your inboxes, when you start sending 100 emails a day, that gets flagged and your domain gets blocked. All your emails end up going to spam, and that beats the whole purpose. So we've employed Smart Lead to help with this. Smart Lead is great because it does all of the outreach stuff for you, but you can also essentially purchase domain. So for example, Concirrus, we have Concirrus.com, Concirrus HQ, Concirrus Hub. And once we purchase these domains, we can just create emails for the different domains, and then Smart Lead warms it up over a period of 2 weeks. And it's also pretty cool because the way it warms up the inboxes is it sends automatically different number of emails on a day-to-day basis. And then there is a remote inbox that replies to these emails. So it makes it seem like a real inbox. And then after a period of 2 weeks, when you've warmed up the inbox, that's when you can start sending emails. And again, at Concirrus, we send out, at max, I would assume 50, 60 emails a day. Because we have 10 different inboxes, we'll then say an inbox can only send 5 emails max a day. So you're way below the limit of being flagged as spam. And I think that's one of the biggest considerations that GTM engineers and marketers have to make before exploring these AI outbound engines.
Absolutely. I think deliverability is probably overlooked,
Yeah,
and that's actually one of the most early, that's one of the important stages, I mean, important tools to consider. So I think there are a couple of vendors where you can just get similar domains related to your company,
yeah,
just buy that up, buy, like, purchase 5 to 10 different inboxes and then warm them up, right? So that's
ex-
going to be your important piece of this puzzle. So that's
ex-
actually a good call out, was.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of the things that gets overlooked quite a lot as well. When I started off in marketing, I wasn't aware of, domains being blocked or inbox being warmed up. But now I firmly believe in, even if it's small scale outreach, it's always best practice to have an external inbox that's tied, linked to your main domain. Because obviously there's going to be an element of brand recognition there. But if you're doing mass outreach with your root domain, that's going to be a problem because you don't want your emails being blocked or spammed when you're progressing a live deal. So,
That's correct. That's well put.
yeah,
And I know some of our US will also be probably thinking like, hey, automation looks solid. They can understand the entire orchestration, how it's all connecting to each other.
yeah,
And at this point for them is basically to replicate, and based on their sales maturity model, see how they can kind of replicate, or what are the other tech stack or other signals they probably want to loop into this orchestration, right?
Exactly.
So one thing that comes to my mind is the outcome. Like,
Yeah.
hey, what happens here? Like, I know apart from the responses, positive responses from LinkedIn, someone gets connection request gets accepted and automatically they accept and then respond to your messages.
Yeah.
Same to do with the email as well.
Yeah.
But are those the only indicator you look for, or is there like a different story that you have?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. When you think about, AI outbound engines, you always see on LinkedIn, LinkedIn influencers saying, I built an AI outbound engine that generates 2 to 3 meetings in a week. Amazing, great. But in reality, it's actually a different story depending on the industry you're from. So, I'm in the B2B industry, and our annual contract value on average is around 6 figures. It's a lot bigger than B2C, for instance. There's a lot more multi-stakeholder work that goes into the deal, not a single person. It's very unlikely that a single person says, hey, I want to spend £1 million on this deal. There's going to be 5, 10, 15 other people involved. And I think
Right.
specifically for our use case in Concirrus, we do get responses coming in, some positive, some saying maybe not now, it's not the right time. But to me personally, the value in this workflow is the brand engagement and awareness that we get. Whenever someone gets an email and then click on a link, this all gets tracked on Factors as well. So we can confidently say, for an email campaign that we've launched, there's been I don't know, 50% of them have ended up going on our website. And I personally see that as the outcome that I've intended to begin with, because that to me is a leading sort of early indicator of, ABM activity within target accounts. Perhaps they're not ready to engage with us or reach out, but they're doing their due diligence internally. So that to me is one of the outcomes that I personally measure, apart from, just the meetings we generate or the positive responses we get.
So what do you have for us? So in terms of, let's say, apart from positive conversations,
Yeah.
meetings being booked, or any other kind of influence,
Yeah.
I know mostly people treat outbound function as a pure a lead gen kind of outreach a system, right?
Yeah.
But how much does it positively impact your brand awareness as a campaign? Like if you think about from that angle, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I might actually, to answer your question, I might actually go on to the next few slides that I have. Can you guys see my screen, by the way?
Yes, sir.
Yep, cool. So again, this is the Factors UI. And to answer your question, Harish, on how brand awareness and engagement actually matters and how we tie it to a commercial outcome or pipeline, if you think about this company here, obviously I've redacted it for confidentiality reasons. We can see that in the month of April, we've been doing a bunch of LinkedIn ads. We can see impressions coming in, the account is engaging, very high level stuff, impressions, nothing that's off too, nothing that's too intentional, I would say. But then when you look at the month of May, which is literally the next month, we can see that based on the website visits that we got from a bunch of different stakeholders, Christine, Laura, Scott, Jennifer, we can see that they've actually ended up coming on our website. And Christine here, as an example, we can see that there's been a ton of website visits within the time.
80 times, yeah.
Exactly. So, from my perspective, it could have been multiple website visits within the month. It could be perhaps, when we send out email outreach, it's a series of 4 emails. So she would have seen and opened multiple rounds of outreach. And we can see that this is an early sign that the campaign is working. People are coming on our website. And, again, they're perhaps too early to engage with us and just going to say, I'm going to poke around, do a bit of sniffing, and, let's just keep it there. But then when we look at the following month, May, this guy called Ken ended up actually filling in a book a demo form. And I believe, to be specific, with the Claude MCP, we ran a Google Ads competitor campaign. They keyed in a competitor keyword, saw our ad, and then filled in a form. All of this is through Claude, by the way. I didn't know any of this in advance, but it was very interesting to see the dynamic. And using the Claude MCP as well, we were able to infer that it was highly likely that these stakeholders would have discussed internally There's been a bit of brand awareness, brand recognition of what we did in space. And it could be tied back to Ken filling in the demo form. And now the thing is, without the Claude MCP, without this overarching picture of what's happened within the account, I would have said, that's attributed to Google Ads. Ken filled in the form. That's the end of the story. Everyone's happy. It's been attributed to Google Ads, but the story actually went back a month earlier, where they were poking around the website, they were doing a bit of DD, they perhaps discussed internally, and then Ken filled in the book demo form because they keyed in a bunch of keywords, saw our name popping up, there's brand recognition and awareness already, and then they filled in the form. And I think that is where the beauty of this workflow lies, is you're able to tell from an account level exactly which stakeholders were engaged, who filled in the form. And now that we have a live deal with them, we are multi-threading and saying, let's engage these four stakeholders because they know the brand already. And sales is a much easier time, engaging these different stakeholders and generating conversations with them, pretty much.
Let me break it down here. So you're saying that you were running active LinkedIn campaigns targeting this account,
Mhm.
and for a period of month there was no active website visits coming from them, right?
Yep.
That paid impressions, that's a good engagement, but nothing else.
Yep.
But then the moment you built the entire GTM workflow, you started reaching out to these folks over email, 3 to 4 different emails, last one being a breakup email, at the same time LinkedIn outreach.
Yep.
And you're able to kind of see when someone opened and clicked an email, comes to
Yep.
your website. And since Factors can basically track all of this multiple different touch points, stitch it together at a user and account level,
Yep.
that basically told you a story which would have been hard to come to a conclusion, right?
Exactly. And to my point as well, when we think about, outbound engines, we all think, the ideal outcome should be, a meeting that you book with a prospect. In this case, the outcome was we had inbound website visits from different stakeholders within the company, and then a Google ad form submission. And this is where I diverge from my previous point. This is where the value comes from. It's the brand awareness and engagement. It's the inbound website visits. That's the early indication for your campaigns working, rather than, the number of meetings you book, because that's rarely the case, especially within B2B tech sales, where the annual contract value is a lot higher.
That's actually interesting because for viewers, maybe everyone would agree here. Each company basically runs their attribution a bit differently. Let's say if it's a first touch, this will probably get attributed to LinkedIn. If it's a last touch, probably it's the Google ads, that basically drove this person to your traffic. But let's say if you're using multi-touch attribution over here, then the story is much different. Even in the use case of U-shaped attribution, then it'll say, hey, yes, LinkedIn and Google Ads did play a part, but in the middle funnel, mid funnel, there was a lot of automations, the email outreach, the LinkedIn, act, uh, activating on those intent signals that played a very big part in basically getting this inbound lead to shortening their buyer evaluation cycle as well.
Exactly. And with the Claude MCP as well, when I ran the Google Ads campaign, I wasn't aware that Ken actually clicked on a Google ad and then filled in a form. On Claude it says Ken looked up, keywords XYZ. He saw the ad, he clicked on it, he spent 15 seconds on your book a demo form, he filled it in. That is, rich insights for me to go back to leadership and say, this is exactly how we, started a deal with company X. This is exactly what happened, and I can actually argue my case and say we should increase budget and spend for LinkedIn ads and Google ads, because if we know it's working, we should scale it up or down, right, where appropriate. So being able to back myself and say our campaigns are actually working is the cherry on top in this case.
This is actually beautiful, Wes, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to know is for the input that you're driving, what is the dollar value, right? So in terms of output, you can then use this kind of workflow, this kind of view that tells you where you've been spending money, what's happening, what was the outcome. That makes the core B2B marketers out there, their life much, much easier.
Exactly. And again, to my point, earlier on AI, everyone today, commercial leaders, they're very ROI focused. You know, it's outcomes driven rather than activity, right? Instead of saying, campaign has had, so and so impressions or clicks, it's saying the campaign has brought in, £1 million of, marketing attributed pipeline. That is a lot more impactful than, discussing top line metrics that, myself and we are also used to discussing with commercial leadership.
Awesome. And I know first of all, thank you so much for walking us through this entire workflow and the couple of examples that you basically showed us with. This was super helpful.
Yep.
And I know we have few more minutes left, hoping to see if there's any questions, or I can also kind of give you guys a quick sneak peek into how our MCP actually works in fundamental. Perfect. So let me maybe pull up my screen for this instance, and I'm going to basically double down on the fact on how you would have probably used the Claude to kind of get the answers on the account. So let me know if this one is visible for you. You know what? I'm just going to share the entire screen.
Yep, I can see. Yeah, in account journey. Yeah.
Perfect. So for people looking at this, there are a few ways you can effectively use Factors API into Claude or ChatGPT that you're using. First thing is you can directly build a skill into Claude or any LLM tools that you're using currently, and you can ask it to fetch an entire account journey. So in this case, I'm running it for a company called Infrared AI. Automatically, it just gives me all the firmographics information and the relevant people that we have engaged. And I can see there was a webinar with various emails, marketing emails being sent, the open rate, they clicked on it, any new page activity that they did, you're able to kind of get it in just a single line, right? And how many ad engagements has happened over the past 30 to 90 days. So it also gives you a bit of an observation or synopsis to say, hey, this person opened a webinar email and this person didn't open it yet. And then similarly, hey, this person explored our LinkedIn ad pilot product page and then did a interactive demo, which is a strong buying signal, right? Typically, our clients typically go to the timeline view or the bird eye view to get this kind of insights. But now, if you're using Claude, ChatGPT, or anything, all you need to do is add a Journey API into it, and this makes your life much easier. I have a good percentage of my clients that are basically using this to kind of give ad hoc answers to the larger leadership to say, hey, what's happening with this account? What has been the engagement? So this just makes it much, much easier. The second thing I'm going to show you is the agent itself. So I've taken a simple example. Now, taking Vis's example for that 500K deal that he mentioned about. Now, if it's a first dish or last dish, it would probably be difficult to attribute correctly. Times like this, you can basically connect the Claude MCP and ask like, hey, build me a factors agent for this attribution. And the agent should give me a U-shaped influence model using all the touch points before a deal creation date. So effectively, Factors will create an agent in your project, pulls all the opportunities, HubSpot or Salesforce, and gets the account journey. We're talking about G2, emails, calls, LinkedIn, any kind of offline touch points that gets registered in your CRM, and then also automatically applies the credit rules based on what your entire objective is, right? So immediate company here, like, hey, reputation.com, it's able to kind of tell me, hey, it's a deal, demo request came in, that's a 40% marketing email, sales meeting, and then the last one being the last dish. So similarly, you can build multiple agents like this. And I'll also take a few more examples here. So Viz, you can tell me if you can see this one.
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Let me know if you can see this one.
Yep.
So the same angle, right? If you have access to Scout, you can also directly ask any kind of questions to say, hey, give me the accounts, the number of accounts that came to my pricing page. It'll build a complete layout and even visualization as well. And just before this, I ran another output just to say, hey, every time my sales team or marketing team, bring in a very big client, who gets credit for what, right? Was it my sales team? Was it the marketing team who drove the ad cover? What is it? So times like this, you can run like a any kind of deal one story agent and say, hey, marketing warmed up this account. These are the multiple campaigns that they exposed to, and this person came in and submitted a form. And then what happened? May 5, this happened, sales follow up, and then a deal was created. And then our sales team multi-threaded with this stakeholders. And then by end of June, everything was done. It's a good account. Everyone is happy, and it's an easy story for your overall leadership in the larger company, right? So insights like this, it's hard to build that story from static graphs or reports, and that's where the whole agents and Claude MCP comes into factor. So if you're an existing client or prospect, let us know. We'll be more than happy to kind of, giving you access to this. And I hope this session was helpful. And I do see there are some comments coming in. With one person owning ABM and demand gen and thought leadership, how do you prioritize when three pulls in different direction? Because that's an amazing question.
That's a really good question, and yeah, it's a challenging one. I think personally it depends on your commercial objectives. So currently at Concirrus, because when I say I own ABM, like I do have other marketers within my team, but we have quite separate functions. But for ABM and demand gen specifically, my priority is to focus on accounts that are in the pipeline that are actually progressing. And if that is, if it's progressing well, if we have enough ad coverage, if we have the right content pieces, is to then work backwards towards demand gen to make sure we're capturing demand. Because the team's quite small, that's the approach that we employ. Ideally, if you had more budget or a bigger team, you would have separate demand gens and ABM team running in parallel. When demand gen's pulling in opportunities, ABM comes and accelerates them. But in my case, it's a bit challenging, so I have to find a balance. And for me, it's closing deals first and then demand gen second, if that makes sense.
Before we wrap it up, maybe I'll ask one question from my end, was for a team that has just $1,000 a month, right,
Yeah,
for running ABM campaigns, and there's no dedicated RevOps person either, what
yeah,
would be your recommendation to them?
really good one. I would actually focus on accounts that realistically can close deals with. And what I mean by this is when we think about, enterprise accounts, the deal complexity might be a lot more than you would imagine with a mid-market or a small account. So I would focus on accounts that can realistically close within the amount of timeline that you forecasted. I would also focus on accounts that have some form of buying intent. So they've maybe released a press release saying they're expanding into a market, or if let's say there's signals, for example, hiring, or if there's a new hire within your target ICP, look out for signals like that. And I would 100% recommend reaching out to accounts that you have connections with already. So it considers, for example, a large chunk of our GTM strategy is leveraging our exec leadership, finding out who they're connected with within the industry, and if they're within a target account. Getting a warm intro is the best way, and in all honesty, it beats the best cold email, the best LinkedIn ad you can run, because a warm intro just cuts through the noise, gets you in front of the right stakeholders, and gets you, on the deal much quicker than you would in a traditional demand gen sense.
That's amazing. And also, even I would say the close lost accounts, right? Those are also a very good segment to go after, making sure that if there's any kind of intent activity coming from them, because you've already established a relationship, you already know them. So for an AE, a seasoned AE to kind of reconnect with them based on the new information, it's kind of easy compared to a net new account that basically is going to just start a conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So I think that's,
There's
oh yeah,
one.
we have
I can
one
take
more.
it. I think your dog wants to answer the question as well.
This is from
Uh,
LinkedIn.
so you mentioned 0.2, 0.3% CTR as the industry benchmark for generic LinkedIn ads. What click-through rates are you actually seeing with personalized account-specific creatives? That's a really good question, actually. At Concirrus, obviously it depends on the industry you're in. At Concirrus, I'm seeing average around a 1.5 to 2% click-through rate for the average one-to-one LinkedIn ad that I launch. Reason being, I think, being the scientist that I am, I think it's to do with the having your prospect logos on the actual ad creative and having one-to-one bespoke messaging. So using Clay, I can pull, draft for me a LinkedIn ad that describes the company's operating model or the language that they use, and then inject that in the actual ad creative, and it very quickly resonates as you're scrolling down. You're like, oh, I see my company's logo. I'm just gonna click on that ad, and it's been a game changer, I would say, in terms of the actual cost per click.
Awesome. So I think you've managed to crack the stopping, right?
Yeah.
You managed to, because most LinkedIn, they're just in the application, they open it up, they see, and then boom, a personalized ad who's not going to stop it.
Exactly. And I think it's going beyond that as well to a landing page that speaks their language. So if they prioritize profitability, for an example, how are you injecting that messaging in the landing page for them to actually go a step further and jump on your website? But yeah, I hope that's helpful to your question.
Perfect. So this was super helpful, Wiz, and I hope the larger audience also enjoyed this one. Maybe we can share like a recap for people who registered. And if you're not able to attend, no worries. We'll also send you this recording. That being said, Wiz, thank you so much for joining me. And
Yep.
it's been a good one.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice rest of the day.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye, Wiz.